I'm looking forward to hearing all the details of this magnus opus that you're working on. That's going to set a pattern for the ages in a sense, because there's nobody covered it as well as you have.
True.
And it's a labor of great love on your part.
Sure.
Yeah. Congratulations and welcome very much to Conversations, where it's a pleasure to welcome to the program a personal friend of Conversations, and that being David Finn. He's of course the founding chairman of the relations firm Reuter Finn, and he is recognized by one and all in the artistic community and beyond as the outstanding photographer and commenter on the significance of the art form of sculpture, and he has a magnus opus that he's involved with in terms of addressing that among other matters, and it's always a pleasure to welcome to the program David Finn, and welcome very much to our set.
Thank you, Hal. It's always a pleasure to be here.
It truly is, in your case, and I wonder, you are working on this magnus opus now, but you have, maybe it'd be worthwhile, you've been involved always in building what is a very large and successful public relations firm, a lot of business concerns and that, but you're coming out of the arts, and you've always had a great particular, if I'm not mistaken, in sculpture. Is that not correct?
That's true. You know, I always say I have at least two lives.
Okay.
Probably have more than two, but one of them is my business life, which is in public relations, and Reuter Finn is a large PR firm that have offices around the world, and I'm very proud of that. And
you have offices in China now?
We have offices in China and Australia and so on, Middle East and Europe. And we've been in business since 1948, and we're a very large firm. Well, you know, we have one division of our company that focuses on the arts.
Yes.
And that's a special interest of mine.
You came out of the arts, you and Mr.
Bill
Finn.
Reuter, yeah.
And Bill Reuter,
and, so we represent museums, Metropolitan Museum, Museum of Modern Art, museums in Europe and in Far East, and corporations that sponsor arts exhibitions and arts programs. So that's one part of our company that I have a special interest in. But about 40 years ago, Harold, I began to photograph sculpture. It was quite unexpected. I've been a painter all my life. I was a painter as a kid.
Have you sculpted?
I've done a little sculpture, but my wife says that I'm a okay painter, not such a hot sculptor, but a great photographer.
Okay, right. Well, Mr. Stiglitz and others. I mean, you know, it's a great art form in and of itself.
Yeah. Well, I started photographing sculpture, as I've told you before, around 40 years ago. And I've done books. You know, Harry Abrams was a good friend of mine, and I published books with about a dozen different publishers in the U.S. and Europe. And I published books from ancient Egypt to Greece and Middle Ages.
Involved with sculpture?
Renaissance sculpture, always sculpture.
On your part?
Huh?
On your part, what you've done...
I've done the photographs of sculpture.
You've put out something on the order of 85 books or something.
Well, my 91st book was just published.
91st? You're getting ahead of your age. Right. Yeah.
So...
Congratulations.
Thank you. So I've about now ended up writing the text for some of those books as well. But usually I work with a scholar. And then, I guess about 4 or 5 years ago, I started working on an overall book about my life in sculpture. The idea was actually George Brazilla's idea. George Brazilla is a wonderful publisher. He published one of my books on medieval sculpture in Moissac, France. And I had lunch with George one day, and George said, you know, David, you photograph more sculpture than anybody has in the history of our time.
That's a true fact. Yeah.
That is a true fact. And he said, you should write a book about your own experiences.
A magnus opus?
So I said, George, that's a wonderful idea.
Yeah.
I think I'll do that. So I took a year, wrote a book about my experiences in photographing sculpture for different books. And I showed it to George after I finished writing.
You published that?
I wrote it.
Yeah. Oh, you wrote it. I see, yeah.
It was about 250 pages or so.
Right.
A complete book about my life and as a photographer of sculpture. I showed it to George, and George said, no, it's all wrong. So I said, what's the matter? He said, well, first of all, you start your first book, which was Gustav Vigeland, which is a 20th century Norwegian artist. Then you go to Donatello, was a 14th century, 15th century sculptor, and you go all over the map, and then it just doesn't work out. So I said, what should I do? He said, I think I have a good editor who can work with you, and maybe he can help
formulate
your text.
Yeah.
I said, okay. So he assigned this woman to work with me for about 6 months. And then I showed him the new text, a very nice lady, and he looked at it and read it and said, no, it's all wrong. I said, I did what you told me. I worked with this other. Yeah, he said, but she did what you wanted her to do. I said, I thought I was doing what she wanted to do. He said, no, I don't know what to tell you. So he took one chapter and he edited it very drastically. And he said, this is the way you should write about your books, and don't end each chapter by saying, and so a book was published. That's boring. Forget about the fact that books are published. Write about the sculptures that you photographed. So I looked at his draft and I thought about it for a while, and I didn't do anything for a few months, and suddenly I got an idea. I said, I've been going in the wrong direction. I've been writing a book about how I got into the world of photographing sculpture, from this artist to that artist to the other artist. Why would anybody be interested in that? What I should do is write a book on the world of sculpture from beginning to the end, to now.
What a great idea.
I photographed sculpture in all 5 continents, in all periods of history. Why shouldn't I write that kind of a book? Well, it ended up being, at the moment, 8 volumes.
8 volumes, and these are books that you publish, are these great, big, beautiful books that are just works of art in themselves. They're not just little pocket editions.
These are now 8 volumes. I mean, they're not done.
I know. It's going to be a long project.
Some of each of them, and I've finished about the first 2, and I'm working on the 3rd volume and so on.
And you're doing it chronologic?
I'm doing it chronologically. What I'm doing is, I'm forgetting about the books I publish. I'm not mentioning the fact that I publish books. And as a matter of fact, take the first volume.
So many you've published and so beautiful.
But you see, the first volume starts with Egypt, ancient Egypt, which is 3000 BC, 2500 BC. And then it goes, next thing I do is Stonehenge.
Stonehenge, a couple thousand BC, I think.
That's a couple of thousand.
Megalithic,
And then I go to other I never published a book on Stonehenge, but I photographed.
Been there?
I've been there, and I photographed a lot of it, and so on.
The Druids.
Right. And then I go to Cycladic sculpture, which I never published a book, but I photographed a lot of it in the U.S. in the Metropolitan Museum and in Greece. And then I go to Etruscan sculpture before Rome, and then Roman sculpture. Now I never published a book on Roman sculpture or even Cycladic, but I photographed those works, sometimes for articles, sometimes for my own pleasure. So I have the material to produce the images for those chapters, and when I publish the book, I have a text that I can refer to, written by a scholar about those subjects. Where I never published a book, I can do some homework and
learn something.
But then write about my impressions of those.
Yeah, you write beautifully, if I may say so, as well as photographed beautifully.
So then I go to Middle Ages, and I go to Renaissance, and so I brought along.
Okay, good. Let's see. What have we got here? You brought me some stuff to see here.
Some of the
mock-ups.
Jackets that we've designed.
Okay. Oh, look, I'll hold it up here. Let me hold it up to this camera.
One at a time.
All right, one at a time. Which one's first?
This is ancient. It says
is this the first then?
This is the first volume.
Well, let's show them this. Okay.
And that
okay, here.
That of course.
It'll take them a while to focus in on, but they've got it. Yeah.
That's an image of Nefertiti. I photographed in Cairo. But you see all the ancient works from ancient Egypt to Rome, all the way to Rome. That volume now is about 380 pages.
This is.
Yeah, I mean
What's the dimension of the book going to be? I mean, how big the pages?
It's a large book.
Large book. Those books you make are so beautiful. And this is already the mock-up of the copy of the... And this is the size of the cover of the book? You've already got that done?
The actual image there is the size of the book.
Okay.
And it's a beautiful picture of that wonderful sculpture of Nefertiti, who was in the Cairo Museum.
Okay, I'm not familiar. Okay, yeah.
Around the 15th century B.C.
Yeah.
And she was one of the most beautiful women in history. So
More beautiful than Helen, maybe, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
okay.
Anyway, that's a nice.
That
cover.
is beautiful. And this is your photograph? These are all your photographs.
All my photographs.
These are all your photographs.
Right.
And look at the light fall and the way to photograph it
Right,
can make it
right.
stand out. It's an art thing to do.
That's true.
And this is going to be what the first edition will look like.
The first one.
And it's called, what is it called? Ancient, The World of Sculpture, Volume 1, David Finn. Marvelous. That's magnificent. That's beautiful, David. That's beautiful. Thank you. And this is already in the works? Is it out yet? No.
No, it isn't out.
No.
Yale University Press is very interested in talking to me about publishing this. I'd love to have them publish it. You know, we have
You
our
would
own,
like them to publish it. You have your own imprint now.
own publishing company,
Yeah.
Finn Press.
Uh-huh.
And we might publish it. But Yale, I met with the editor the other day, and she's very interested in. It would be nice to have University Press publish it and then have their distribution facilities. I mean, we have our own distribution organization.
Right.
But they have a great tradition with universities and scholars.
Yeah.
And so, anyway, that's the first one. This is
And
second
you're
one.
dealing with art, so the publication and the printing and the quality of the printing and the reproduction and so forth is very important. It seems to me Japanese were really good at that. I'm not sure,
well, I've
but
had many books published in Japan.
I thought you had, yeah, because of the high quality of the
High quality and low cost.
and low cost, huh?
Yeah,
Okay.
And Japan, China, Italy, France.
It's emerging in China now?
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay,
So-
high tech.
Huh?
That's high tech. Huh?
Well, yes, and you know, it's very often that a book can be published overseas
Mm-hmm.
At a lower cost than the cost of paper to print it here in the U.S.
Really? That's reflecting differentials in labor, or
They
what?
buy masses of paper, so the
Right.
costs are cheaper.
Uh-huh.
Labor is cheaper.
Uh-huh.
And they do a wonderful job. So very few publishers publish in America, but we have our own printing firm.
Yes, you do indeed. If you did that, you knew you would do it right.
So, you know, we've published a lot of books
Yeah.
of mine and others that we want to publish.
All right. But art is also a thing where somebody, it would seem to me, you're doing all this photography and you're putting it out, but it is a passion, it is a love of what you're doing. So the people that are doing this kind of work would want to be in love, presumably, with the process of producing. It's like producing a great work of art.
That's true.
And that's really significant, and sometimes it's lost in some of the commercial
Well, that's true.
dealings.
So
yeah.
when we
Yeah.
publish it ourselves, we print it ourselves,
Uh-huh.
those books that we do publish.
Yes.
You know, we we take great pains to make sure that the images are what we want them to be.
Mm-hmm.
Now, other printers do that as well.
Yeah.
But since our printer is right across the river in East it's either Brooklyn or Queens, I think it's
Yeah.
Brooklyn.
Uh-huh.
We have control over that printing process.
And we're making great strides in the reproduction of images and so forth through time. I mean, we're getting a capability to do things. Mr. Gutenberg started with the thing way back when, but it's improving all the time. And even in exponential terms in the modern experience, you have to be familiar with not only pamphlets or design, and the idea of design is really important too. It permeates all your work, I guess, in terms of communicating and affecting public opinion and that sort of thing.
Let me show you some of the other.
Absolutely.
This is second.
Let's put this over. I'll put this over here then.
Okay.
Okay.
This is medieval.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't know what to put on the cover, but I went to Cloisters, the Cloisters Museum here in
Let me hold this
Manhattan.
for them to look at, and then you can talk to it, okay?
And that is a Spanish, around, I don't know, 12th, 13th century, beautiful image of Christ on a cross. And it's very unusual for two reasons. One, he has his hair, braids coming down over his shoulders.
Right.
Secondly, his eyes are wide open, staring out in front of him. Usually the eyes are either closed or looking downwards. And here he's looking in front of him.
Is he in crucifixion at this stage?
He's being crucified. He's up on a cross.
With eyes wide open.
Yeah.
Oh.
Doesn't look pained. But,
and who is the sculptor?
No one knows.
No one knows the sculptor of this.
No.
And yet this is one that has made such an impression on you.
It's
And you've you've had a heavy-duty design, a role in terms of the design and presentation of it all, right?
Of course.
Okay,
yeah.
okay, right. Well,
See,
and
what's the
this
next
is
one?
volume 1 and 2, and these are sort of well along the way then.
Yeah, they're almost finished, really.
Oh, that is something, isn't it?
Actually,
And
the
this
next
again,
one.
these are all your photographs, of course, with your trusty Hasselblad, is that correct?
That's right, that's right.
I see, is this 1 or 2 here? I don't know. Yeah, there's another one here.
That's early Renaissance.
Is that another one? Okay,
Yeah,
I put it over.
That's volume
Hey,
3. Volume 3.
Now, volume 1 and 2 are already in the works, as it were?
They're all in the works.
They're all in the works, okay.
1 and 2 are almost finished.
Uh-huh.
Number 3 we're working on.
This involves selecting photographs and presenting them artfully, and then also you have to get the text to go along with it. You're doing both text and putting your photographs, editing your photographs.
I imagine I'll have invite a scholar to write an introduction to each of the volumes.
I see, an intro.
Yeah, right.
But you comment on the pieces, and you've always done that, and you always do it just beautifully.
Yeah.
So it's a major work you're involved in.
It is.
It must be very satisfying.
It's wonderful.
Yeah.
This sculpture, you have it in front of your face. You can't.
Yeah,
see
I can't see it. I can see it on the screen now.
But
we want the folks to see it.
It's a close-up of a head of San Rizzore, a saint in Italy. The sculpture is in Pisa. Or at least I photographed in Pisa. I think it's been stolen since then.
Really?
And when I looked at that face, this close-up, I gasped because I thought I was looking into the soul of Donatello.
Wow.
I don't know why I felt that way. I didn't know why at the time, because I photographed almost all of Donatello's work. But later, I found an art historian wrote an article.
It's beautiful.
Speculating that this was a self-portrait of Donatello.
Oh, really? 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 Isn't that something? And I
felt that way when I photographed it.
This is Pisa, is it? What is that, bronze? Or what is it?
It's a gilded thing. It's bronze.
And this is going to be early Renaissance then, okay.
Early Renaissance. And so she speculated that it really was a self-portrait. And Anita Moskowitz is her name, and she and I became good friends.
Now, that is whom, Anita?
She's the art historian.
Art historian.
That wrote the article about speculating that it was a self-portrait.
Oh, I see, and she agrees, right?
And she was the one who came up with the observation. And she had various reasons to support her thesis.
So do you get a lot of collaboration from art historians and so forth as you're doing it? So that's a wonderful thing where you can have that kind of a thing, because it's a meeting of minds.
I learn a lot from the art historians.
You still got something to learn, do you? I thought you knew it all.
But they appreciate the view that I take of a particular work of sculpture. So I learned from them, they learned from me.
When did you first pick up on focusing? I know your first client at Rue de Finn was Perry Como, if I'm not mistaken, the famous popular singer.
Good memory.
And you started in a broom closet somewhere, and you built it all up and everything. But when did you were always in the arts, and were you always interested in sculpture? You came out of the arts, and didn't you call the company the...
art and industry. That was our first. Build bridges between art and the world of business.
Really, a good and noble endeavor.
We've done that actually, but that was our idea initially, and we couldn't get any clients when we started in 1948. So we started a general PR firm to promote Perry Como records and various products.
Was that your first client?
Perry Como was our first client.
Right. Okay, good. Yeah.
Lovely man.
Yeah.
And then not long after, we started trying to marry art and business, and so we did that in the early stages of our business. And but it wasn't until a few years later that I began to photograph sculpture. I was not trained as a photographer. I was a painter. I always painted.
Had you studied painting?
I studied painting, yes.
Figurative or what?
Well, I've done figurative and abstract paintings, and I've done a lot of books inspired by poetry. You've probably seen some.
Yeah, I think the muse translates. I'm not mistaken. But you've always been interested in that. But sculpture particularly grabbed you along. You said about 40 years ago or something.
About 40, yeah.
About 40.
Yeah. I got to show you this
Okay,
one.
all right, here we go. Here we go.
The
High Renaissance now. Okay, here it
There's
is.
Michelangelo.
Oh, not bad.
He's probably the greatest. And,
You think, yeah.
and it's interesting because this is in the Medici Chapel in Florence. I was very conscious that Michelangelo placed his sculpture or designed his sculpture so that the natural light would bring out the surface qualities that he felt was most important. So I hesitated to use artificial lights, but in this case,
You mean in the photographing?
in the photograph.
Yeah, sure.
I didn't want to do something that he might have had a problem with, because he put the sculpture where he thought it should be seen in that light. But here I photographed it with special lights.
You did?
And I was pleased in the way that it brought out the quality of the face and the sculpture, so that I think Michelangelo would not be upset with me.
You think Michelangelo would not be upset? That's a nice thing to think. The divine one.
I think
he was well recognized as the Medicis in his time, right? Unlike Van Gogh or something like that. But he was the divine one. He was just absolutely magnificent. How do we account for something like the wonder of the Renaissance? You know, with so much of a explosion of creativity and so forth.
But you know, I'm puzzled myself about how to write about the so-called Middle Ages and the Renaissance. The Middle Ages were called that because it was between the height of Roman civilization and the Renaissance. They were in the middle.
Yeah.
But in the middle, great things were done.
Yeah.
Great works of art were done. Great philosophies, great theologies. It was not a sophisticated civilization. The cities were not the same as they were in Rome or they were in the Renaissance. But the art was great, as great then as any other time.
Not really. You say as great as the Renaissance, and yeah, really. That's interesting.
Yeah.
It's by the art that we know the ages more than all the politicals, I believe.
But I mean, you know, you go to some of the medieval churches in France or Germany or Italy, Chartres or England, and you see wonderful sculptures. They're different from the Renaissance and different from the ancient Greeks and Romans and so on.
Reflect a different consciousness of the time?
A different point of view as to what to represent, how to represent a human being. The artists were just as skilled as other artists, but there was a different tradition. Their forms were expressions of a religious concept, a spiritual concept. And so the figure of a human being was portrayed differently from the time of the Greeks and Romans in the Renaissance and later on. It's like today, look at Picasso or Matisse or whatever, Dubuffet and so on. You see representations of human beings that, you know, that others might say, well, why are they doing that? They're not at all like the people we see.
Right.
And so, you know, when one understands what they were trying to do,
or Henry Moore.
Then you realize why they chose that way to represent humanity. Same thing is true about the Middle Ages. If you understand what they were trying to do, then you can look at the work as a work of art without being critical that Picasso, you know, showed all sorts of strange ways of portraying the human being. Anyway,
Guernica and all that. It would reflect the state of consciousness of historical eras. We go back to the great cave paintings in France, and it had some sort of a larger idea of human fitting into the world and what the world was about and that sort of thing. A sense of human nature, maybe, or of nature. It had a different shifting, altering consciousness that's characteristic of the human experience, I guess.
If you have an eye that can look at a work of art with a sensitivity to its deeper qualities as a work of art, you can find greatness in every period, in every part of the world, and recognize that civilization
Mm-hmm.
in the world of art does not mean that art gets better
Mm-hmm.
as civilization becomes more civilized and
Okay.
more sophisticated.
Okay.
It doesn't get better. It gets
Doesn't-
different.
Really? Okay,
Yeah.
that's really an interesting concept. Yeah.
Life
Yeah.
changes.
Uh-huh.
Our lives change.
Mm-hmm.
And new methods are found to do
Right.
this and that and the other thing.
Uh-huh.
But art
Mm-hmm.
may change, but doesn't get greater.
Mm-hmm.
Art, here we live today in a very, very advanced civilization.
Yes, indeed.
Do we have the greatest art?
I don't know. You're the one who follows it. I don't know what we got. We had Campbell's soup cans, and
Yeah,
we had
well-
pop art and
Well,
minimalist thing. I
yeah.
saw a thing one time. It was just a white canvas, and it was a work of
Yeah,
art.
right.
I have a hard time on. Or who was it who wrote that? It was Thomas Wolfe who wrote that wonderful word, the painted word.
Yeah.
Did you ever read that book?
No.
Said it wasn't the art that mattered. It was what the critics said about it in order to put a big price at Sotheby's.
Yeah.
You know, it's all put in the
Yeah.
market. But yeah, I understand. But art is such an important thing in terms of the important value. The really important values perhaps are not seen as being urgent. Urgent values come when you've got the enemy at the gate, war, starvation, needs, material needs, and so forth. But the really important things is in the art, in the sensitivity. These are the things that live down through the ages, don't you think? From architecture, the queen of art, it's a very important thing. What about the things somebody said? Marshall McLuhan, I used to say, they quoted the Balinese, saying, and what is the dictionary definition of art? Where does the word come from? What is it saying? What is it connoting when we say art? And the Balinese have a saying. They say, we have no art. We do everything as well as possible. You know, that's a view of making a wonderful meal, or growing a wonderful garden, or having a wonderful relationship with another. What do we mean when we say art? It's an enhanced reality, or what is the definition? You've been looking at this subject for these many decades. What do we mean when we're talking about art?
That's too demanding a question, because so many people have addressed that thoughtfully, and I think there are different points of view about it. You can go today to the new Museum of Modern Art here in New York and go to the second floor and see works that are done fairly recently, and scratch your heads and say, I don't get it. I don't get it. You go up to the top floor, next to the top floor, and you see the great works of the 19th and 20th century, and you say, that I understand.
Yeah.
You even learn to understand Rothko and Jackson Pollock and some of the mid-20th century artists. But when you see the stuff that was done 10, 20 years ago or last year, you could say to yourself, I don't get it. Why is that here?
Yeah.
So the only answer that I can give to that question is that you have to first understand why the artist did what he or she did.
Interesting.
What
the state of consciousness?
No, what was on their mind?
Yeah,
what was on her mind?
Yeah. Or in the zeitgeist?
Why was that thing created that way? What was the quality that the artist saw or felt or tried to achieve? And why did the curator select it as an important work of art for the museum? Why did the curator think that was a good work of art?
Yeah.
When you understand the answers to those questions, then you can say, I don't like it.
If you understand it from
If you understand that.
Yeah.
But
You
if
can
don't-
say it, but it isn't very well educated opinion. Yeah.
If you just scratch your head and say, wow, this is ridiculous, you know, then you're not qualified to make a judgment. That sometimes it's difficult for us ordinary lay people, even I say it myself as a
I don't
lay-
think you're an ordinary lay person at all. You are very, very well versed in the arts.
Yes, but when I go and see some things that I'm not familiar with,
Yes.
I'm not familiar with them.
Yeah, right.
I don't understand them. And so I can easily dismiss them, but I know I'm wrong if I easily dismiss them. That's the way I feel.
Yeah.
I have to understand them first, and then I can say, I don't think that's particularly good or particularly great, but I understand it. And I can appreciate why the artist did what was done. So,
and it's important to have that state of mind in relationship to the work of art you're dealing with, that you can understand it.
Yeah.
If you don't, there's a saying, was it Pond, I think, who said artists are the antenna of the race. They pick up things early. We had Cubism. It was presaging changes in physics and so forth, and everything is interconnected. Do you think there's anything to that, that the artists are in a unique position to pick up on things, sensitivities that are in the zeitgeist or something that the population in general takes for granted or isn't sensitive to? Or
yeah, one thinks that way because, you know, artists are so often not appreciated by their contemporaries, at least in the early stages, and then are later respected. You know, there are so many stories of the Van Gogh. And,
only sold one, I think, and that was the Theo.
Right.
Yeah.
And so many artists have that experience and are later discovered and so on. But so there's a sense that the artists are ahead of the time. That time, the civilization catches up with what an artist does.
Well, that's the notion of the antenna.
Yeah. So that
you think there's something to that?
There's something to that. Although, you know, there are many artists who were highly recognized in their time. I mean,
Michelangelo was the divine one in his time, Medici.
And the Greeks were respected in their time. And so it's Picasso was respected in his time.
Very much so, yeah.
So it's hard to say what all this means, but for me anyway, a work of art can inspire you, and uplift you, can give you. It's when they talk about poetry, talk about religion.
Yeah.
That it gives you a sense of intense experience, an emotional reaction.
Yeah.
Let me show you another one.
Yes, by all means. These are absolutely handsome.
This is Canova. Now, he was in the 18th and 19th century.
Okay.
Now, you see
this is the cover for another volume, one of the volumes?
Right,
so you got the covers for the volumes already? All you have to do is find out what you're going to put in there? Is that it?
Canova was considered in his time, late 18th and early 19th century, as the greatest sculptor who ever lived.
Really?
Forget about Michelangelo. Forget about the Greeks. Canova was the greatest.
Canova
was the greatest in the late 18th and beginning of the 19th century.
I'm really ignorant. Where did he do his work? I'm sorry to admit it, but
he was Italian.
Italian, okay.
Napoleonic times.
Okay.
He died around 1821 or something like that. And the next several decades, his reputation fell to the floor.
Isn't that interesting?
They thought it was very overdone. It was too romantic.
It was the romantic era when he was doing.
Well, it wasn't.
We have
these classical. This is classical work.
Yeah.
Neoclassical work. But anyway, then about 25 years ago, Tom Hoving bought.
Well, now hold it up. Thomas Hoving of the museum.
The Metropolitan Museum bought a Canova sculpture for about $100,000.
For the museum?
For the museum, big purses.
Here, let's show it again. Yeah, okay, yeah.
For $100,000, it was a lot of money for a Canova at that time. Today, Canova, there was a Canova that was sold in England for $11 million.
Wow, it's like Mr. Van Gogh started doing
so
that.
Canova's now come way back, and I think he's a wondrul sculptor.
So look at that, that's gorgeous. I didn't have a chance, I was holding it up. That's really beautiful.
You know, Stendhal said when he looked at that sculpture.
Stendhal was such a great writer.
When he looked he said that he just swooned when he saw it.
I did that one day. I was talking to my friend today just before you came. One of our producers here, and she said she's going upstate, and I said it's dangerous because nature can be pretty beautiful. And I used to live up in New Paltz, New York, and in the autumn it's dangerous because the trees have changed. I was driving in a car one day, and there was a maple tree that was so perfect. I mean, it couldn't have been. And the light fall coming behind it was so perfect. I'm driving along this little lane and everything like that. I knew what I was doing, but I went into a swoon, and I drove right into the meadow, without realizing it's dangerous to drive. You know, nature can put on a pretty good show. That's beautiful, David. Beautiful. Okay.
Then I went to early modern.
Okay.
And there's Rodin. The hand of God.
Right.
And he saw the hand of God as two lovers embracing each other.
That's
and,
a pretty exalted moment, yeah.
It's a wonderful sculpture, and Rodin was a very different sculptor, very dramatic, very romantic. He had a marvelous touch. His figures all have wonderful quality, and his composition of his pieces are great. So that was a different world Rodin created, and he was considered the greatest sculptor
at his time.
ever lived. So you see that
he was. I mean, I think if you were to take a survey now, I think there would be, in a certain sense, a general agreement that the Divine One was pretty much setting a standard. Michelangelo, no?
But
yeah. So, but then there's these periods where they recognize the latest developing and say he's better than even Michelangelo.
Well, they say that.
But would you think, maybe it's not fair to ask, but do you have a favorite sculptor? Or is it hard? It's like trying to judge. Do you ever watch the dog show, the Westminster Kennel Dog Show? I love dogs. I think they're just wonderful. Andy Rooney said the other day, there's no doubt that dogs are better than people. But and they come at the end and they got all these beautiful dogs and they're going to pick one.
Yeah.
And I say, how in the hell can you decide which is the best? And it's probably not fair to ask, but you don't have such a thing, or maybe it's gauche for me to ask, have such a thing, or is it possible to have such a thing as a favorite sculptor?
No, I really can't answer that, because each artist has something very special to convey, and that you feel when you look at his or her work. And I have struggled with the whole issue of greatness in art.
Another big theme, yeah.
And I wonder what it really means, and why. How can I say that this artist is greater than that artist? It's very, very hard to say that. In sculpture,
you can say it in baseball, Joe DiMaggio. Or you can say it in boxing, you win.
Yeah, but
well, we judge things a lot by how much it'll fetch at Sotheby's.
Well, I know, but we know that is not really a good measure.
You don't think it is? The market is not a good measure.
Prices go up and down.
Yeah.
You can't really tell. But Henry Moore used to have a game that he would ask.
There's another great Henry Moore.
Yeah.
He's a friend. He was a friend. Right?
A friend of mine. He was asked people to list the 10 greatest artists who ever lived.
Yeah, right. The great 10 human beings.
And then they would say, this, that, the other thing. And then one day I was in an airplane with him, and I said, "Okay, Henry, it's your turn."
Yeah, that's right.
Who were the 10 greatest artists?
What did he say?
So he started listing them, and he said, "I can't pick 10. I can maybe 20. I can get 20." Right. So,
And that's was that always? And then because you got poets, you got music makers, you got painters, you've got sculptors, you got architecture, you got all these different expressions of the artistic capability. Do you think it translates between media? Like, if somebody is really, is there a sensitivity? It's a sensitivity that they have. It can translate from poetry to music, or from. They just had this thing that Scorsese put on about Bob Dylan. He was a great poet, But do you think the muse translates or not? Or they serve one another, or they appreciate one another?
I became absolutely consumed by T.S. Eliot's 4 quartets. And it was published around 1941 or 42, and I was working at night as a salesman in a bookstore, Doubleday Bookshop, when it was published. And although we all knew the Wasteland and other poems, this was 4 quartets, and it was kind of a religious poem, and it was wasn't my mood, it wasn't our mood at the time, and so it didn't get much of a reception. Many years later, I went back to 4 quartets. I read it. I was absolutely overwhelmed.
Really?
I memorized it. There's something like 789 lines. I memorized the whole thing.
Wow.
And I still...
You want to recite it now?
And I could recite
it. Remember all those irregular lines?
My memories are not as good as it used to be. But I still wasn't satisfied. And then I started making paintings. And so I produced 108 paintings
Around that?
Around 4 quartets.
How did you do that? How did you translate that, which the paintings were into? I mean, the writing.
I took a passage.
Right. Right.
I wrote the passage on a
piece of canvas?
On the corner of the canvas, on the side of the canvas, and I painted a picture that I felt was a visual expression of what I could see into those words.
I'll be darned. Okay. Yeah.
And then.
And you were moved as you were doing that?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Did you ever wonder? Well, this is what it says. I don't know what it represents. Did you ever have a short circuit of the?
I often do that, but in any case, creating that painting helped me understand those words. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And those paintings were exhibited at the Yale Center for British Art, and then they were published as a book together with the words. And that was the first time that I painted images that were inspired by poetry. I've since done several other series. Yeah. And I've done a series on a poem by Yeats, and I'm now I did one on Milton. And I'm now working on Dante.
Dante, that's what we had Marcella Lortka, and she said you read Dante together, right? Yeah, he's something else. I mean, yeah.
Well, I know I have a hard time understanding Italian. No English.
You read it in Italian?
Well, no English translation it does justice.
Yeah, right.
To Dante's words.
Right.
So I don't speak Italian, but I read it, and Maristella helped me understand what the Italian meant. And
she could do it if anyone could. She's a wonder, yeah.
When she reads Dante, you feel what the meaning is.
Right.
So anyway, I'm now painting that. Let me show you a couple more.
Okay, we got a couple more. The trouble is we don't have enough. Oh, this is Mr. Moore. Right?
That's Moore, and that's modern. As a sheep, what he called the sheep piece, which he did as a gift to the sheep. You see
a gift to the sheep.
And the sheep are in the shade underneath the sculpture and rubbing their shoulder on the bronze. He loved that sculpture. Now I photographed that at his home.
You like the photograph?
Yeah.
Who wouldn't? Yeah.
He loved the photograph.
Yeah.
And so anyway, that.
How did you get the sheep to be there? They were just there.
Well,
or did you bring them in and set it up?
They came naturally.
Like Cecil B. DeMille.
When visitors would go and try to photograph them, they would run away.
Yeah.
But I had a long lens.
Oh, I see. So I see.
I was the only one who ever was able to photograph the sheep inside the sheep.
I'm knocked out by some of the photographs they can take, or the film they can take now of nature scenes. Nature is just amazing. They had a thing about, what was it last night? Some creatures about monkeys in the... And okay, we better move along.
That's
we
my
get this
final.
This is it. So this is the book covers of this amazing series that you're going to have out over the next
Asia,
period of time.
Africa, and the Americas. So that's Khmer sculpture. This one.
Okay.
And I have Indian sculpture, Chinese, Japanese, Aborigines, and Inca, and Aztec, and American Indian. All those in this final volume.
That's going to be the final volume. Now, what was the and you've got oh boy, what was the logic or how you set it up? It isn't totally chronological. You got a lot of attention on European. Or how did you set it up? And you came to that at the end. You didn't go back to the ancient cave day stuff and everything like that.
No, I didn't. I never photographed cave sculptures or images.
Were there sculptures?
Well, there were images of the caves.
Yeah, it was images, not so much. Sculpture is in the round. Sculpture is
necessarily.
No, okay.
It could be. It could be a relief,
a bas relief or something. Yeah.
So anyway, it's chronological except for the last volume.
Yeah.
Where I go into non-Western subjects.
Have you dealt much with that?
Yeah, I have. I have done a lot of
Angkor Wat?
Yeah, I haven't been to Angkor Wat, but I photographed some Khmer sculpture.
And some of the stuff of the indigenous peoples in the New World, that sort of thing. Yeah, it's an interesting way to see the human condition. And do you talk at all in the narrative that's going between these photographs about the conditions, let's say, political or empire rising and that sort of thing, a historical narrative that tries to set the context within which this was taking place to get it, or you do it through understanding of what consciousness is reflected in the work of art itself?
Yeah.
Or that's your approach to it? You don't. It's not an ongoing historical narrative.
No, I mentioned especially in ancient Egypt and other periods sometimes who the subjects were.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe a word or two about what was happening in that period.
Mm-hmm.
But my main interest is what one can see in the sculpture. What should a reader look at when you look at the photographs?
Didn't you write a book once, How to Look at a Painting or something? How to look at a sculpture?
I wrote several books. How to look at landscape, how to look at sculpture.
How to visit a museum.
How to visit a museum, and then my last one was how to look at everything.
How to look at everything, which is, and that's really an interesting kind of thing because we tend to see everything through the alphabet and through written word and everything, but we're now coming into a multimedia world increasingly. It wasn't until we had photographs, I don't know, daguerreotypes and so on, ways of representing things that are coming now and being crescendo kind of context with the internet and the technology and everything that's coming now. We're coming back into joining nature in a certain kind of way after a couple 100,000 years of our wandering sojourn on this planet. Do you get a sense that we're at a particularly crucial time in terms of the evolution of the human society, or not? We have weapons systems, extension of our technology that could apparently destroy the whole species. It's an existential challenge.
You and I have lived through that period when we knew that at any time the world could be destroyed.
We're still in that. Yeah, but at our own hands.
By our own hands.
And it was in our lifetime that transition was made.
And it's still...
Is it reflected in the consciousness and in the art and in the context, and is it well enough understood, or lessons to be learned? Or
yeah, I think it was in the earlier period, 50s, 60s. I think young people have sort of gotten used to the fact that there are nuclear bombs somewhere hidden in different countries, and they could go off at any time. But the fear that we had after World War II and the Korean War, the Vietnam War, I think has somewhat subsided, so that even today when we read about the war in Iraq and other wars that are taking place, we don't really think about nuclear bombs at this point. We know that we always read about somebody stealing or buying the knowledge that could, North Korea or what have you, that could lead to the creation of a nuclear weapon, and that this could be disastrous for us. But I don't think that the folks who are young people who are living today have the same fear that existed when people were urged to buy places to hide.
Or duck and cover. You remember duck and cover? You had to get under the desk and hold your hands over your head when the atomic bombs were coming.
So it's a little different. Now we're fearful of
ecology.
Well, no, the kind of thing that happened in the World Trade Center. Those kind of attacks are being made around the world here and there, which is very different from an atom bomb. But anyway, it's hard to say what the future will hold. None of us know.
I guess that's what some of the artists have been telling us, and the poets and others too have been telling us for a long time. But it is, I'm just wondering, and particularly as it relates to whether there is, that's an existential, the stirrup was used, the bow and arrow was used, the musket was used, the rifle was used, the Gatling gun was used. We've used tanks, we've used bomb, and one wonders if we're, maybe we've missed the bullet or the danger and it's past because we have won or something like that. I don't know. Anyway, let's talk about art, maybe.
This is interesting because this refers to what you're saying. A painter friend of mine, his name is Daniel Bennett Schwartz, created a painting he worked on for about 15 years, this one painting.
15 years on one painting?
Yeah.
That's like...
And it's a painting about the nature of our time, what's happening. And I'll show you the painting.
Okay.
this is the painting.
All right, I'll hold it up for the audience, and you can tell us about it.
Can
I'll
you
have
see
to
it?
look at. I can't see it well, but I will on the screen, and I'll see it after. You explain
There are
it for us.
people running down the street.
Like Hieronymus Bosch, is it? No.
Well, no, they're running down the street. He said to their doom, fearful dogs are standing by, frightening dogs, and there's one man in the center who's trying to turn back and go back to normality,
Yeah.
to the kind of life that was not disastrous, but he felt that the world was running into its own disaster. And this painting he worked on for about 15 years.
15 years.
Yeah. And when I saw it, I said, you know, I could publish a book on that painting.
Did you know him?
I just met him.
Could I look at it? No, let me look at it, because I couldn't see it.
Yeah. You see,
Oh,
this
yeah.
guy,
Oh, I see. Yeah, right.
running away.
Uh-huh.
And
15 years.
yeah.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
what I did was the first time I ever did this.
Yeah.
I took a series of photographs of details of that one work.
Wow. Oh, I see. That's what you've done.
And then you see that became
Oh, yeah, and he's got the details of that one. This book is all on that one painting.
one painting.
Good for you. When did you put this out? I hadn't seen this.
This came out
Guide to Leave, so this
a few
was-
months ago.
just recent. You got Tom Wolfe and people talking about it.
Yeah.
Portrait of the Artist Running. Daniel, where is he hanging? Is he still?
He's here
he's
in
New York.
New York, right?
Maybe we could get in touch with him and get in touch with him.
Yeah,
and talk about.
he'd be a good guest
15 years?
Yeah.
There was that movie with Woody Allen. Was it Annie Hall? He'd been in psychotherapy for 16 years, still trying to find some answers. But this is, yeah. Well, that's what
he'd be a good guest for you.
Yeah. Has he launched another project that's going to be 15
Well,
years?
he's done a lot of paintings.
He's done a lot of other paintings.
Yeah.
This one he worked on all along.
Yeah.
Can you understand that?
I can understand that.
You
Sure.
can?
Sure.
Have you got anything you've worked on that way?
Well, I told you about T.S. Eliot and Four Quartets.
That's right, yeah.
I memorized that and worked on those paintings. I did 108 paintings over many, many years.
Right.
So I can appreciate that. And, then you see in the beginning of the book he has all these sketches that he did.
Yeah, right.
Anticipation of the final painting.
Yeah. Well, that's the way they'll work, but that's really something. And when did you become aware of that painting?
Well, a mutual friend invited me to come to his studio and see his work. And I saw his work and I liked it. But then there was this big painting.
This one?
This is about
One more, take a look at it. This is the whole painting, and then this book, which is another handsome. But this is one of the 83, or how many of you did?
Yeah, that's mine.
Of pieces of he's taking it apart, and the words are yours.
I wrote something for it. Yes, I
did. So there's a lot. There's text here. You wrote for it, and then you put some meaning to this.
He wrote himself about what it meant to him. And I wrote about my.
What do you think? It's good for somebody to write the comment on their work of art, or is it better to have someone else do that?
Both are good.
Both
ideas.
are valid, huh?
Yeah.
It was Thomas Wolfe who did that painted word, like I said to you before.
Right,
He said it's the people, what the artist critics say.
Well, Henry Moore would describe his own feeling about different works. And
who?
Henry Moore.
Oh, yeah, right.
And others did too, Picasso, Matisse, and so on.
Have you got a couple of other things we could show here, David?
Well, this is a magazine we publish, Move Magazine.
Right.
We call it Move because the world moves.
Yeah.
And I have, incidentally, an interview here of Walter Cronkite. Which
good. Yeah, he's a major figure in terms of the media. It's important to understand the media.
But I also have an article here about how the love of books has enriched my life.
That's about you, right?
Yeah.
Are these a few of the books you read?
That's just some of my books on a bookshelf.
You get them all. How can you get them all? And then every time you turn around, there's another great book coming in over the transom. And also multimedia. Multimedia is coming in. We're getting back in touch with that. This is a publication, The Move. It's a quarterly or monthly?
We publish about 2 volumes a year.
2 volumes a year. I see. You're going to publish one of Maristella, I think, in one of the next
Yes,
volumes.
she has written an
article. She has on the
book.
fragility of democracy.
Yes.
A huge subject that
Yes,
she understands well, having lived in Mussolini's
right.
Italy and so forth.
Very
and you got one other book there, if you're not mistaken.
Well, this is a book by a nephew of mine who went to Israel and lived there for about 3 or 4 years.
William Lewis Finn.
Yeah.
Where will the atheists Pray?
Yes,
Life and Laughter.
Yeah.
Boy, if we need some
It's
laughter.
an amusing book.
Yeah, let's see if we can get a chance to look at that.
A bunch of essays that he wrote when he was in Israel about what was happening there.
Is he living in Israel now?
No, he's back lives in California.
He's in California. And did you all publish this, Rudder Finn?
Rudder Finn Press
Good.
published it.
How many books have you put out now in Rudder Finn? Because I remember when you first got it started.
Yeah, about 15, 20 books. And we have a few more coming out.
Well, it's good that you've got this piece with Walter Cronkite. He was the most trusted man in America at the time when he was on the networks, and that's really important, I think.
I've been trying to photograph friends of mine who are over 90.
Yeah, you've been doing that, I know.
Yeah, he's not quite. He's 89, I think. I want to show you a photograph I have of him.
Okay, well, yeah.
And because it's a nice picture. And
you've certainly had an array of friends. You know a lot of friends.
Yeah.
You have a lot of friends in the art world.
Nice?
There, listen. Oh yeah, there he is. There he is, Mr. Everyone recognizes him. And I don't know. What do you think about the media now? We're a little bit concerned here in public access that we want to keep this media open to a lot of voices and so forth.
I think that's important.
And that's something that I think he is signing on to agreeing with us. It'd be good to have many voices that can be heard to allow all this art that's going to become, maybe we're coming to a renaissance, the adverse side of that potential destructive scenario. There will be a renaissance like never before, and a great deal of creative capability that might come flowing out of the human consciousness and psyche, and that would be a wonderful thing to look forward to for our grandchildren.
What he thought the most important event in the 20th century was the trip to the moon.
It was something else. It really was.
Said mankind changed after that happened.
Well, that was just about the time that the best minds tell us that we crossed the line. Didn't happen right in 1905 with special theory of relativity. That was about the time they come to Joshua Lederberg and Jonathan Schell and some others.
Right.
Monsieur Kako tells us we crossed that line where we could destroy our species with the existing systems about 1970.
Right.
Bucky Fuller said that's the time when, in a design sense, we may be transcending scarcity coming out of history. So that was a major time of transition. That's when Bobby Dylan was singing all those songs that got so many people involved in terms of the movement of the 1968. But listen, there's so much going on. It's the Chinese have a saying, I think, David, spare us from living in interesting times. And that's all shot to Hades because these are the most interesting times ever. Yeah. And I really thank you for coming in and you really covering the field of, we're looking forward very much to that work coming out, the history of sculpture, and I thank you really very much.
It's a pleasure always.
It's always good talking to David Finn, and as always, he's got so many nuances to, the world of art and expression of the human condition, and we thank you very, very much for that, and look forward to the magnus opus that's in the works. Yeah, you're actually working on it now.
Yeah. Thank you, Harold. Always a pleasure to talk to you.
Yeah,
you have a broad range of interests yourself.
Well, yeah, and we do. It's an interesting time to be alive. We've been here all these years, all these